Welcome to CivilNet. As you know, we're committed to trying to cover the Middle East, especially the Armenian communities of the Middle East, especially these days and months. And today we're going to be speaking with Alison Tahmizian Meuse, who is located in Lebanon. She's a reporter, researcher in Beirut for Agence France Presse. But she has studied the Middle East. She's a Middle East studies scholar and particularly a student of the Egyptian Armenian community. And if we can, in the next few minutes, we're going to talk to her first about what she sees, hears, knows about what's going on in Syria, and then we'll move on to doing some comparisons with Egypt. Alison, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Alison, you know, these last few days, the blackout, the internet blockage from Syria has caused most of us to just rely on Twitter and a few other odds and ends to figure out what's happening there. What's the read in Lebanon? Is it any easier for you? The informal information channels, do they work?
I can speak to you about, journalism in general has had a difficult time covering this conflict since day one. We recently published an article in AFP about covering Syria, about the difficulties, whether you A, go into the country, B, report from the outside, and if you do go into the country, you have two options. One of them is to go in with a government minder, which will severely limit your access to talking to people, and B, you can be smuggled in unofficially, and that's usually under the cover of the rebels, so then you're seeing it from their side, and you're also exposed to any attacks on them. So, what ends up happening is news agencies rely on stringers, correspondents within the country, but also these informal networks, social media. It's become, not necessarily acceptable, but necessary to rely on these sources. A lot of people have turned to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which has a network of people in the country that do not know each other to get a feel for what's going on. As for the last few days, it's kind of like it always has been. It's just relying on everyone doing the best they can to get direct information when possible, and when that's not possible, to just try to get a feel by triangulating information from state security, from doctors, from lawyers.
Tell us a little bit about the general feeling that you might get in the Middle East as people watch each of these countries going through these convulsions. They're not just evolutions, I mean, Egypt's was of one kind, Syria seems to be of another kind. What does one community gather from the other? Is the Egyptian experience a source of anxiety, a source of inspiration? What feeling do you get?
I don't think you can compare the two situations. I mean, as you said, every country is different. In Egypt, it was actually so quick, looking back and comparing to Syria. People compare Syria more to, they're worried it will be like Iraq, where it'll be this protracted thing after this all comes to a head, that this is only the beginning. And I think that's where the big fears come from. In Egypt, it happened very quick. It was, largely peaceful. And life is going on. It's more of a slow drag of political struggles now. Whereas in Syria, it's just become more and more militarized. And so you can't compare. But of course, this overall fear of, the Islamists are coming, yes, that exists, and maybe that's the common thread.
Is that the feeling of the Egyptian Armenian community, that the Islamists not just are coming, but are here? Or is the Egyptian Armenian community, reconciled to this new sort of democracy in Egypt?
I think for a long time, these societies are so, apolitical, and you're used to, not having any impact on the government. And for the Armenians in Egypt, it's such a small community, maybe 6,000 people, depending who you count as an Armenian. So, for them, they really did stay neutral throughout the whole thing, and it wasn't very long, so it happened before you know it. And now, it depends on the person. I don't think that this recent turmoil would have caused anyone to actually leave the country. the people who are leaving, this is just the slow trickle that have been leaving ever since the 60s. It's a falsehood that emigration stopped after the 60s and Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalization.
That's a falsehood, you're saying.
That's a falsehood because, yes, the big wave stopped, but there always has been that slow trickle of people leaving. And the community is much smaller than it was then. And, this is just because of, the opportunities they can give to their kids, just the overall, feeling in the country, the feeling that, well, this isn't really our country anyway, so why not be somewhere else? So it's, I don't think you can say that this single, revolution is what is, would make people leave. No, it's not.
What about the leadership of the Egyptian Armenian community?
It's, they're willing to, to work with the new guys, I think, on the whole. There's, the businessmen who they've always had, the people who are probably in the Muslim Brotherhood or, in their workplaces, and they have contact with these people. These people aren't a mystery, Egyptian society is very conservative, and, it's not like they're this mysterious force that suddenly comes. I think they're willing to go with the flow, just like all Egyptians, they're going to work with the new guys, and they're willing to see it out. And, their lifestyles have not been affected. The community still goes about their day. They still have, everything intact. People still go out for drinks. People still socialize. This really hasn't touched people's lives on the day-to-day basis.
In some ways, the banality of what you're saying is almost encouraging. I mean, I would think that sitting in the, this tumultuous Middle East, that it's almost encouraging to hear that, life is just going on in Egypt regardless of who's come back into power.
Yeah, life is going on. And people who they have their business and their livelihood based in Egypt, they're not going to suddenly pick up and take a huge risk.
All right, thank you. Thank you for talking to us. And we'll, of course, keep watching the Middle East and both evolution in Egypt and perhaps revolution in Syria, and see where it takes these communities in the century to come. We've been speaking with Alison Tahmizian Meuse in Beirut about the Armenian communities in the Middle East, particularly of Egypt. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching CivilNet.